My recent videos testing slime mold intelligence against normal tap water, those videos really struck a nerve online. Several people have reached out to me to do interviews, one of which was first published last week by author Eric Peterson on his debate channel here on YouTube, Planet Peterson. This conversation was a lot of fun. We did a deep dive into the question, what is intelligence? We discuss where I agree and disagree with Michael Levin. We talk about how intelligence is normally thought of and studied in the field of animal cognition. There's quite a bit of diversity in that field, but there are some very important agreements. We talk about how group intelligence works, where does machine learning fit in, and then finally, we talk briefly about this wonderful new paper, which I blanked on the name of during the actual conversation, Replication of Experiments and the Canonization of Incorrect Conclusions. This paper is on a very important topic, but it's one that's not discussed often in science. The dangers of failing to perform proper controls. Most people are really good at doing basic controls in their studies, but here the authors talk about the importance of designing studies that will test the foundational assumptions of your main experiment. If you don't stop to check that your experiment actually checks for the thing you think you're checking for, well, as Stuart West would argue, you're not even actually doing science. This has been a problem in studies using game theory, an area of research the authors worked in, and I would argue this has been the main problem in these slime mold intelligence experiments. They have not stopped to check to see if their test actually tests for what they think they're testing for. A link to Eric's channel, Planet Peterson, and a link to the paper can be found down in the video description.
All right, welcome back, everybody, and I'm pleased to be joined by John Perry. Maybe you've seen his videos from Stated Clearly or from Stated Casually. So thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, it's great. I'm happy to be here.
And then for anybody maybe that isn't familiar with what you do, just give us a little bit of a background.
Yes. Stated Clearly is my main YouTube channel, and I started that like over a decade ago. And over there, I do animations about genetics and evolution and chemistry, and those are used in classrooms. So that's been going for a long time. A lot of, I mean, if anyone watching was in high school in the last 6 to 5 years, you probably had to watch my videos in your classroom or got assigned them as homework. What is DNA and how does it work? What is the evidence for evolution? What is a gene? Stuff like that. Once that channel was up and going, I started a second one, Stated Casually. I just talk about what I'm doing, what I'm thinking about. Sometimes I would tackle more creationist stuff over there. So I visited the Ark Encounter one time.
Oh boy.
And I did a tour of the Ark Encounter. I've done experiments with my nephew. We measured a skull through water displacement because people claimed that it was an alien. It was just a head-bound skull. So we got a replica of the skull that was, a perfect replica. They actually used the skull to make it, cast of the skull. And we measured that using water displacement. So we talked about, Archimedes' principle, how you can measure irregular objects. And it turns out, sadly, it was not an alien. It was just a normal human.
Darn.
Just stuff like that. And sometimes things get a little bit more dicey over there with, creationist stuff and so on. And then recently I did one. I actually recorded this experiment. It might have been as early as 2020. It was a while ago. It was during COVID. It was during the lockdowns. And I recorded this experiment where I've heard about this intelligent slime mold, which we hear about it all the time. There's tons of YouTubers that talk about it and stuff. It's been all over TED. Everyone likes to say that slime mold is intelligent because it can draw maps and it can solve mazes. And it's always just, I've looked at what it's doing and I'm like, well, tap water could do that, I'm sure. So I actually just decided to test that in my basement during COVID. And I filmed that and I just sat on it for a long time because there's this huge anti-science movement going on during COVID. And I don't want to feed that because I'm pointing out that there's an error in a Nature paper. They did not do the proper controls you would need to do in an experiment if you're trying to test intelligence. So I just kind of sat on it for a while, and then I just finally whatever. I'm going to post this. So I did one version where I just showed it without really explaining a whole lot, and then a second follow-up where I addressed people's questions, and I addressed Michael Levin, who's a developmental biologist who talks about this all the time, the intelligent slime mold. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
And that is specifically why we are here. Now, the
Yeah.
goal today isn't really to like stir the pot surrounding what's going on between this or anything like that, but I think it's a really cool conversation to have, dissect your thoughts on it and dissect what you just try to ask you what you think about intelligence and maybe how that emerges in biology, maybe like where it
Mhm.
came from, its origins, which creatures have it, which creatures don't. So it's
Yeah.
just kind of for fun.
Are you familiar with his work?
I did look up a couple of the papers that he posted in that really long reply. And the one paper is 25,000 words. The other paper, I didn't, it looks like it's about as long. I
Mm.
read through as much of that first paper as I could, but it is very long and very dense. So, but I hadn't
Yeah.
heard of his work before then.
He's been doing a really good job. One of the big things he's pushing for talking about and studying bioelectricity in normal cells. We've been obsessed with bioelectricity in the nervous system, in the brain since forever, right? We 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 measure it all the time. We have special devices for measuring the bioelectricity of the brain. All sorts of cognitive research has been based on reading these signatures and then correlating that with behaviors and with thinking and problem solving and so on. We've been doing that since forever. His big push is, hey, all cells are doing this. They're just doing it less and sometimes in slightly different ways, slower ways. We're obsessed with cell signaling of molecules. Why don't we look more at this? And so he's a developmental biologist and he's looking at how electricity is being used between cells as they're signaling and developing a body. And he thinks that there's a lot that we could learn from this. He's looking at it in cancers as well. He's not like the original pioneer in this. We got started doing this a long time ago, but it got interrupted by the discovery of the structure of DNA, all the excitement around genetics, and then molecular signaling proteins. Like this all got buried, and he's bringing it back up. He's shaking off the dust, and he's like, "Hey, there's gold here. Let's look." And that's way more important of a thing to do than it might even sound if you're not in science. It might like, whatever, he's just saying that we should all look at this. So but that is actually very important. It's really important. Not only is he saying we should do it, but he's shown through a couple of experiments that there is value in this, and so he's demonstrated there's value in this. So that is a very good project to be doing.
Everybody will have seen the experimental setup that you're talking about with the sand in the water, because I'm going to put that in the edit here for all of us. But yeah, in simplest terms, I'm sure a lot of us have seen slime mold. You can put it in a maze, put food at the start point and food at the end point. It'll send out its tendrils or whatever we want to call that. It'll spread itself out as an organic mat everywhere, and then just basically suck everything up except for the most efficient path. So it's
Mhm.
solving the maze. But as we can see, tap water does that. So
Yeah.
I want to try to understand your take on this. Your claim is that the experiment can't tell the difference between unintelligence versus intelligence. Is that about right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's as far as I could go with that one experiment. It's just that, it's if you're testing a pregnancy test and you test it on a bunch of women and it comes back positive, you get really excited. "Oh my gosh, everyone's pregnant. Wow." And then you test it on some men and that it also comes back positive, then you're gonna be like, there's a problem with my test."
Hmm.
Um, so this is the this is it's what is it? A negative, a negative control. That's what you're trying to do. You're testing something that should come out negative. If it comes out positive, then you know that your test is wrong. And, it's not gonna tell you why it's wrong or how it's wrong. But we do know enough about this organism to know what it's doing. It's it is actually using a very it's actually using its internal water to solve this problem. It's it's it will pulsate above the food, and it just kinda squirts its internal liquids back and forth between the pulsating spots, and that ends up draining the spots that are not in the shortest path to the food sources. And so all the internal juices, they end up getting sucked into the areas where there are food, and then there's a little bit that acts as a bridge between those two food sources, and it's using mass flow. It's using water to do this,
Mhm.
fluid dynamics to do this.
With, not like zooming out to like a 35,000-foot view on everything, but kind of just with respect to this, what is it you would say that you agree with Levin about?
Well, I think okay, the special thing is that you have water that can just all it can do is fall downhill, right?
Mhm.
So it solves this maze by falling downhill, basically. Uh, Fluid dynamics can find the shortest path. This organism has evolved to exploit that property that water has. That can it can find shortest paths, and it's using that not to find where's downhill. It's using that to find where's the food and how do I distribute my organelles to the food. And you could say, of course, that's a clever little thing to do, right? Um, but this is an evolved trait. There's no sort of indication that there's any sort of understanding here. It's what Dan Dennett called competence without comprehension, and this is what the process of evolution is really good at doing. Uh, brains, cognitive systems, they emerge much later in evolutionary biology, and they allow you to do all sorts of novel problem solving, like during your own lifetime on the fly. That's a different thing. Evolving an adaptation, evolving a trait that can, exploit physics in this case to solve real problems for an organism. That's awesome. You could say that it's clever in quotes, but it's not. That is not what everyone in the field has been calling intelligence. And this field goes back, it goes all the way back to Darwin. The study of the origin and um, the evolution of intelligence.
Okay. So, do you like clearly I understand that you have, problems with the experiment with the slime mold. Do you leave the door open for slime mold a little bit, or do you think that slime mold possesses basically no intelligence?
That's a good question. I mean, yeah, I would have to leave it open a little bit for these, yeah, I would leave it open a little bit. I mean, there's a long history of people doing experiments to try and tease out the difference between so you have conditioned learning, so, like Pavlov's dogs.
Yep.
It's been argued for a long time that cells can do that. Um, so it's a very simple type of learning. And they do that, and we actually know mechanically in many cases how they're doing it. It's through gene regulation and so on. And we started studying this right after World War II with in bacteria with these different gene regulation proteins. So there is a very simple type of learning that cells can do, and there could be more stuff that we're missing. That certainly there could be. So, eh, but we have these experiments. They're set up. That there's a long history of doing them. I mentioned in one of my videos. There's a paper on beaver intelligence,
Yes, I really
and it's
like
really
that.
fun. I need to just read. I think I haven't done this on my channel yet, but I should just read that entire paper. It's good enough. It's pretty accessible to people. It'd be really fun to just to show people what they're doing because the beaver is it's very much instinctually driven.
Mm.
And one of the things that we try and do in these experiments is to tease out instinct from active intelligence, active problem solving. And the beaver has these crazy instincts, and you can see this. I used to work at a wildlife center where we just take in injured animals and we'd rehabilitate them and then let them go. If we get a baby beaver in, it would be trying to build stuff all the time. They love to collect things and shove them against the corner, and, like, they've got this instinct. One of the instincts to be found in there that's very, very strong for beavers, like, it bothers them even if they know it's not a real problem, it still bothers them. The sound of running water
Which
in
is
the
just
dam area.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, "There's a leak." And so they'd put speakers. I'm not sure if it was this paper, but someone was putting speakers in the dam and playing sounds of running water, and everyone comes there, and eventually they'll figure out that it's fake, and they'll leave it alone, but you
Mhm.
see that they'll still go check it out a lot. They're bothered by it. They're very bothered by it,
That's
and that
just
is
mean. That's
yeah,
just
yeah,
mean.
yeah. Well, I mean, the battles that people have with if they're trying to manage water and they've got beavers in the area. It's very frustrating. They can figure out anything you do to try and block them. They'll figure it out.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
very clever.
Beavers are incredibly important species. They're niche partitioners. Is that what you call that? They basically create niches for all kinds of other organisms.
Yeah, I'm not.
I don't
Is
think
that
partitioning,
term?
that is a term. I didn't think that's what you call that for beavers now that I think about it, but there's something where they basically create them.
Yeah. They changed entire ecosystems, and usually for the good, unless you built your house there already, or
Unless you build
you have a street, a road there. Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of, is it merely following instinct or is it clever? I mean, the this is a big tangent from my notes here, but I was thinking of bees and
Mhm.
the way we have figured out that bees will change their dance to match the fact that the sun is now in a different spot in the sky from
Yeah.
when they were collecting the nectar, because they have to tell the hive, where it is and how to get it. And it's that I don't know how intelligent bees are. I was listening to Peter Godfrey Smith over the last couple days, and he talks about bees a little bit in a Sean Carroll podcast that he
Mhm.
did, and how people are thinking that there may be some real kind of intelligence or
Mhm.
what they call sentience, which is like, does this animal possess a feeling of the sense of like what it means to exist or something like that. Not exactly what it means to exist, but to have like a personal experience. Some animals
Yeah.
probably can't feel pain, and so they kind of are thrown out as candidates for that kind of thing. But anyways,
That is a. I want to point out that intelligence and consciousness is kind of what you're talking about there. Those are two different things.
yep,
Most people separate those. Most researchers separate those. Uh, Consciousness itself, like why is it that we have a vivid experience of our own existence? That is a question that honestly it doesn't have a good answer. Well, not that I've seen. The Because you could get we think you could get the same essential behavior from what they call a philosophical zombie. So it's
yeah,
something that acts exactly like you, but does not actually experience its own existence. And that is a weird open question, and we don't even know. It's not even. We can't even fully say that it's adaptive because we don't think that you would necessarily need it, but we have it, obviously, and we also can't measure it. We don't know how to measure it properly, and we assume that other people have it because we have it, right?
yeah, yeah. It's called the hard problem of consciousness.
Yeah,
It'll probably never be solved. I think we have good like working theories. I mean, that's all science has,
yeah,
essentially. I don't really want to go down that road at this
yeah.
time. That may be that could be good
It's a
for the
different, topic than
but for
intelligence,
the
yeah.
for the bee, it's just it has such remarkably specific and what looks like deliberate and intelligent behavior,
Yeah.
but I am tempted to think the bee is just being instinctual with that.
Mhm.
And I actually don't remember. I know I've read books where they talk about where they try to trick the bee by putting it in a box and having it an artificial sun. And I don't
Yeah.
remember if the bee's actually able to do the dance the correct way or not. I wish I could remember off the top of my head. So viewers, go and look that up for yourselves.
Yeah. I I'm not totally sure where the field stands on that, but I am pretty sure there is growing consensus that insects definitely have, like well, some insects have shown to have the lower ends of what we would actually call intelligence. And l let me just talk real quickly about the beaver again. One of the things that was really convincing to everybody, all the people in that field is, beavers don't deal with strings really in their world, but you could tie a piece of bread. They love bread apparently, even though they're supposed to eat
Hmm.
sticks.
Yeah.
But you tie a piece of bread to a string, and it just immediately figures out how to deal with it. It just looks at it for a second and figures out, "Oh, I can pull up the string, or I can cut the string, and I can get the food." It's not it's just immediate. It's something unnatural for it, but it figures it out. The other thing is that it it has this instinctual drive, to be obsessed with that running water noise, but it can figure out that, no, this is not actually a problem. I'm going to ignore it. Uh, there's all sorts of different problems that they were causing for the beaver, and it would solve them. And it, it was this is showing active problem solving. So it understands that a problem exists, or it perceives a problem, and then it reasons through how to solve that problem. And that is how we typically define intelligence in the field of animal intelligence. And that's how intelligence is really understood by, you know, most people, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was actually my next question. I wanted to ask you what your sort of definition for intelligence is. What I typically say is something like the ability to apply prior knowledge to novel tasks.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
That's basically how I do it. But is yours like, do you have something else or like examples you try to use for yours?
I have I should have set up notes for this because yeah, here's the thing with definitions and stuff like this. If you try to just come up with one on the top of your head, you're going to miss something.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's within the field, a lot of people use list definitions, which is pretty common. They list off the things that you would need to have in order to be considered intelligent.
Sure. We do that with life.
Yeah, yeah. Editor's note, at this point in the conversation, I waffled a little bit because I didn't have exact definitions of intelligence in front of me, definitions that people have worked on carefully for many years. This one here is sort of a amalgamation of definitions that are common in animal cognition. The way that people were talking about this in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, this definition really let them design very distinct experiments to figure out how an animal was doing what it was doing. And it respected the public's understanding of what intelligence is. Intelligence is the ability to perceive a new problem and develop a possible solution through the application of past knowledge or causal reasoning. This is tangled with, but distinct from instinct, simple conditioned learning, memory, or trial and error problem solving alone. It's worth noting that an animal with this level of cognition, what most people would consider intelligent, it might actually look at a problem or perceive it in some other way if it doesn't have eyes. It might look at a problem and decide that the solution is trial and error problem solving. That would actually be the intelligent thing to do if it looks into its toolkit of past knowledge and realizes the solution is not there. Okay, back to the interview. It's essentially, the ability to perceive a problem and reason through a possible solution, and you're drawing on past experience. So, it the one of the things here is, we call a lot of our new software programs, we call them artificial intelligence. Most of them now could pass any of these if you put them in a robot and it knew how to operate that robot. It was trained on how to operate that robot. They could pass pretty much any of these problems the beaver is passing. So we call that artificial intelligence, but it is effectively it's working just as well as a beaver's intelligence. Uh, Very differently though,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, the
uh,
the software thing, that was always like in the very early days with the chess computers, for example, they just simply relied on the brute processing power. It would just simulate
yeah,
every conceivable game. But then not all that long ago, they switched to neural networks and just made it
mhm,
way more efficient. And now, so it doesn't have to simulate every possible game. It just sort of learns basically from, okay, I did like these 10 steps. Let me analyze those 10 steps. Okay, now let me only focus on the one or the couple out of the 1,000 iterations I just did of those first 10 steps, the 5 that were the most successful, and only go from there. And then, the robots were able to win games like Go, which I've never played, but
yeah,
the idea was Go is too complicated even for supercomputers, but now they can master it in hours, and that's
right.
that's really interesting, and it's doing, that's mimicking the prior knowledge thing. So
Yeah, you said brute force there. That's another thing. If it's just trial and error, it's not considered intelligence. If it's
yes,
just brute force, it's not considered intelligence by most intelligence researchers.
agreed. Yeah.
They're trying to tease that. I mean, that's what they're trying to tease out from an animal that's intelligent versus an animal that's just has instincts. instincts evolve through this trial and error process we call evolution. Uh, the a lot of organisms will figure things out through trial and error. But, I mean, some people want to include trial and error with memory, and, so there are these fuzzy lines within the field where people will debate about where to put the actual you gotta draw a line in the sand somewhere,
Yeah.
because everything in biology, almost everything has blurry edges, but they're not so blurry that tap water is intelligent, right?
Yeah.
So, the the you don't wanna confuse I care a lot about public education, and I care a lot about using terms in a way that the public is going to understand. So, if I am dramatically different, if we have some term in science that's way different than it is in everyday lingo, that's a big deal, and that's a big part of the lesson, a big part of the presentation, that this is different than what you think it is, because it's so easy to confuse people, and they'll just, you know, they'll take what they thought they understood, and then you you don't have a chance to correct yourself, so.
Yeah. One of the after watching, your video on this, I started I took some inspiration from like your take on it and started thinking about it. And what water's not capable of doing is manipulating its environment to solve a problem. And I would think an
Mm.
intelligent creature could definitely do that. So like water is just literally completely incapable of doing that. And so I was thinking of the slime mold and I thought, why wouldn't the slime mold just go over the walls? And it
Right.
probably, I'm assuming there's probably a clear top because I think the slime mold probably can spread out like that. At least I'm assuming so, but maybe I don't know, maybe it doesn't grow up walls
So,
all that way or
it actually,
something.
if you watch the video and you look at the experiment, it did a little bit. They tried to make a barrier that it couldn't. Like, their goal was to see could it solve this maze. So
Yeah.
they tried to make the maze high enough that you couldn't cheat, that the slime mold couldn't cheat, but they just didn't. It was a little bit going over the walls and stuff. Uh, but it ended up in most cases, it ended up settling on a pathway through uh, the actual, growth medium that they had on there. But yeah, I mean, everything is limited, so even the beaver has a limit to its intelligence, we have limits to our intelligence, so you can always make a trap that's not solvable for your subject, and that's one of the problems too. I mean, it's very difficult to do these types of research because you could have some people say that border collies are really smart, it's the smartest dog. Eh, it's the dog that's most obsessed with pleasing you. So
Oh, interesting.
it's difficult to tell how smart a wolf is because it's not gonna do anything you ask it to.
Yeah.
Uh, so you have this I mean, we have border collies they can memorize, like, 300 words. If you name 300 different objects, I might be exaggerating. At least it's at least 100. They can remember them all, and they can grab the toy that you asked for, and they very rarely will err if they've been trained properly. But we just can't get a wolf to even try that experiment, so we can't it's very difficult to do these tests. So, this field's super interesting because, yeah, how am I gonna figure out if a honeybee is actually problem solving in real time when it's doing its waggle dance, or if it's evolved this thing? Some of the stuff that people do are it's kinda cruel, like, wow, sometimes it's really cruel. There's a I can't remember what kind of bug, insect it was, but there's this idea in the literature that insects cannot feel pain, and so it doesn't matter what you do to them. So there's no ethics guidelines in animal research for bugs. I don't think there's any at all. There might be some, but they would just there was this I think it was an ant, maybe it was a type of ant, and it would always find its way back home, but it wasn't using pheromones. This particular species did not. They're like, how does it remember? How does it find its way back home? And they cut its legs off at, like, the shin, the equivalent of the shin, and then they measured how much shorter the walking path would be, so they made it walked out to an item, it got the item, then they cut off its legs at the shin, and then it walked back, and it was it stopped and it couldn't find its house, its little where it was going, at the exact same distance that you would expect if it was counting its footsteps or it
Oh,
counting
interesting.
time somehow
Hmm.
of walking. So it was the equivalent shorter than it would be if it was missing those parts on its legs, but it tried to walk the same distance. So
Yeah, yeah, because its legs are shorter and it can't cover as much ground each step, so
right.
it just stopped at the equivalent number of steps. Yeah, that's pretty dumb. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I gotta
And
say.
I wish that I knew that exact study because I'm remembering something that I saw or read years ago, but yeah,
Yeah,
it was very interesting.
something that almost no insects do is they don't groom a spot. You know, like, if you tear one of their legs off, they don't groom it, and
Yeah.
that's one of the markers we have for, well, It it knows that there's something wrong with it. It has a subjective pain experience. But if they're not doing that, then it's just as if they're completely oblivious to their own body being torn apart. So that's sort of a
Quite possible.
justification behind that. I've read a little bit of the I learned that from Peter Godfrey Smith too. His book Other Minds and his other book Metazoa are really really cool books about
Yeah.
animal minds. If anybody wants to check them out, I always recommend them. So,
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem for slime mold, and you talk about this in your video, is that even if it can reliably solve the maze every single time, it doesn't store any kind of representation of the maze. It doesn't know that there's any kind of goal in mind, and it doesn't have the capacity to generalize that information because there's no memory involved. So there's no application of that knowledge. So it's
There's not memory in that case, but there's like cells can, regulate their gene expression, so I think that, like, there are certain types of toxins that you can like, if you block it with a toxin, but there's a really good thing on the other side, and you have it past that trap a few times, it will then be able to do that way faster because it's upregulated the genes for dealing with that toxin. But yeah, it's not it's certainly not, remembering the maze or does I mean, we don't see signs that it's remembering the maze, but there are basic types of cellular memory like that where it's gene expression memory.
sure. Would you would you say, you know what that makes me think of is the immune system?
Mhm.
Do you think
Yeah.
that there's some kind of intelligence in the immune system?
Well, okay, so all of these things in cognitive research, here's how we think of things. You have cellular behavior. Well, first you have physics, then you have cellular behavior. Cells are exploiting physics and doing all sorts of cool things. On top of that, you have cognition, and normally we define cognition as the cellular behaviors of neurons and networks, right? That's not intelligence yet. And then we have intelligence that emerges from cognition in many different animals, lots of different animals. So that's kind of the hierarchy. You have cell behavior, then you have cognition, then you have intelligence. Uh, you can have all sorts of what you could call clever uh, cellular behaviors that don't involve nervous systems, don't involve they don't eventually end up giving rise to real intelligence like we would, uh,
Mhm.
say that a beaver has, right? And that's so you could say that, yeah, the immune system has memory. It's this active immune system. It's doing clever things, but it's evolved to do those things. We can understand the mechanics behind it. One of the questions that Michael Levin has, and one of the reasons that he thinks we should redefine intelligence to be more broad is he would want to say that that is intelligent. And one of the points that he makes, it's a pretty good point actually, is that the like why are we so obsessed with neurons? Like why is it that only the things that neurons do are what we call intelligence? And he wants to broaden that definition too because he thinks it'll help us understand or put in artificial intelligence into the mix and stuff. And so we can consider all of these things to be intelligent. And I I can get behind that. I just don't like. when the definition is so broad that tap water and similar things fit the bill. So you could call what the immune system is doing. You could call that an evolved, uh, just an evolved behavior, or you could try and take Michael Levin's position and say we should call this intelligence of some sort.
Yeah, there was another paper that he linked, but that paper wasn't publicly viewable, just the abstract was.
Hmm,
And it says we define learning as a process where a complex system of interacting components modifies itself in response to an applied stress or stimulus, resulting in structural changes and information gain. So that sounds reasonable. And that
yeah,
sounds like the kind of thing, an immune system does. It doesn't quite sound like the kind of thing a bacteria does, but bacteria are successful because they kind of do the brute force thing. There's so
right.
if a bacteria can divide every 30 minutes like some can, then one bacteria in 24 hours can have, I think it's 140 trillion theoretical descendants. You
Right.
know, so there are those cool experiments where you start with some bacteria and then on the plate, you increase the antibiotics by a concentration of like
Yeah.
tenfold each time.
Yeah.
And some bacteria make it there. And those are so cool because it actually looks like those evolution diagrams where it shows like proliferation and extinction. It mimics that perfectly. So, but I don't think, I just don't think bacteria are doing that sort of cognizantly or really intelligently.
Well, okay, but here's so bacteria have sensors. They can detect what's in the well, they're limited, but they have sensors that can detect what's in their environment, and they have evolved responses to those. So they look when you look at single cells underneath a microscope, they're doing all sorts of stuff that just looks like an animal behaving. It seems like they're making decisions and doing clever things. And then as far as memory goes, you have the ability to turn genes off and on, which is that's what some people want to call cellular memory. So
Sure.
if there's certain sugar in the environment, they'll turn on the genes for producing the enzymes that digest that sugar. And when that sugar is gone, they'll keep making it for a while and then they'll turn that off. When that sugar comes back, they have to turn it back on again. And that's you could say this is a type of memory. And so cells are very interesting. The complexity does emerge and it gets harder and harder and it gets fuzzier and fuzzier to like where do we draw these lines? And Michael Levin, he wants to play with that a lot.
Yeah, and it is like it's kind of like a demarcation problem, when does a pile of sand become a heap? Well, the difference between a heap of sand and not a heap is not one grain of sand, but
Mhm.
eventually that means you can take one away every single time, and every single time you can't say there's any difference really, but that
Yeah,
process eventually leaves you with no sand at all.
right.
So the heap disappears at some point, and there's sort of this, it's called a pleonistic fallacy, where you can't just add more parts or steps or pieces to something and then just say, ta-da, because that doesn't explain where this emergent thing like intelligence or consciousness actually comes from. So
Mm,
we are going to, like, no matter what, we're going to draw that line somewhere. I think what's kind of useful is to try to figure out, and I have a question on this shortly, but
mhm.
like we maybe can't agree on the edge cases, but if we expand out, we can say this definitely is not, this definitely is. Where's the battle, in between there? Going back a little bit to what I was talking about, like with water and slime mold, they don't really modify their environment. And I don't think that that's really a deal breaker. But for me, when I
Yeah,
imagine like really the simplest organisms that could possibly, meet my criteria for intelligence, like ants or like worms, I do imagine them as being problem solvers instead of just reflex machines like biological robots, you know?
right, right.
Is that how you think of them?
Uh, yeah, well, I mean, in one way, you could just think of all of us as super complicated biological robots. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I know what you're saying. It's like, is it a bear trap or is it something else? Like you watch a rattlesnake, it's gonna sit there for a long time and then snap at a mouse. But
Mhm.
it's more sophisticated than a bear trap. As things get more complicated, as things get more, as their degrees of freedom increase, yeah, they become much more like us and much less like tap water, right?
Have you read any Daniel Dennett? I've only read a little bit of
Yeah.
him. So he, a long time ago, convinced me. I was reading From Bacteria to Bach and Back Again. That's the only thing of his I've
Mm,
read. And is like the craziest thing. He said, I think that an ant colony is a mind. And I
mm,
thought that that was actually incredibly interesting. Maybe ants aren't quite intelligent, but together they create this, not exactly a superorganism. I don't know what you would really
mm,
call it, but it does behave like a mind. And we can transfer that to the brain in an interesting way because neurons don't know what they're doing. They are
mm,
just
right.
reflexive. They don't decide to propagate an action potential or anything like that. But I think that brains do produce a mind. And so ants that individually, maybe they don't even know like what they're doing, at least with respect to the hive, they they produce that hive that is like a mind. And then the interesting thing is the needs of the colony, the needs of that mind, if we want to call it, that they're producing, modifies the behaviors of the ants. And that can be like an organism or like a brain does as well, which is just really
Yeah.
fascinating to think about.
Yeah, ant colonies are technically classified as superorganisms, like, but if you look at Stuart West's work in evolutionary transitions and individuality, it, yeah, eusocial insects are classified by him and by a lot of other evolutionary biologists as superorganisms because the individuals can't survive on their own. They're completely interdependent. And they also reproduce as one organism. There's one set of gonads that gets used. Well, there's a bunch of males and stuff, but the queen is the and I'm now thinking of bees. Some ants have more than one queen, but like in honeybees, you typically only have one queen.
Mm.
So you've got one female reproducer, and then you've got a bunch of drones as well. But the yeah, the whole hive acts as an individual, and it's under some really weird selection pressures that make that possible. It's like the
Yeah,
math.
the sisters are more closely related to each other than potential offspring. Which
Yeah.
means, yeah, like, why would a bee have in my recent book, Facts That Aren't True, I talk about this because it's very odd, the idea that an organism might have a self-destruct feature, like, if they
Yeah.
sting, they die. How can that possibly be evolutionarily advantageous? Well, if we take the selfish gene approach, dying
Mhm.
for your sisters preserves more of your genes than it would you reproducing, because
Yes.
your offspring are only gonna be 50%, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, that's especially true in bees, and it's actually it can be true, uh, in normal mammals and stuff, but it's only true if you are actually dying for your siblings, for your so we call this inclusive fitness. The way that the math works out, as far as your genes can tell, is the genes doesn't care if it actually makes a literal copy of itself or if just there's an identical copy of itself already in some other organism, and that is what gets a copy
Mhm.
made from the genes I view, those are the same. It's just it's literally the same thing. The math works out the same. So natural selection ends up treating it the same and treating it. It's it just this is just how the math falls out. And it's really interesting how that works. I did an animation on the selfish gene where I go over some of that stuff, but it's it's especially true in eusocial bugs because of their weird genetic setup. They have a setup that uh, makes the math even more in favor of sacrificing for your family. Also, they grow up in these colonies where they are almost certainly related to everyone there, closely related to everyone there. So all that stuff adds up to where you can get the evolution of self-sacrifice. And our own cells, actually, they will sacrifice their lives for the good of the colony, and
I
they do it all the time.
I just was thinking
Apoptosis.
of that as you were saying that because I thought, well, wait a minute, what does the body do? Well, if it gets too cold, you have those precapillary muscles in your in your capillaries, and they
Yeah.
constrict when your body temperature gets too cold. You will sacrifice fingers to save your torso because that's where the central nervous system and the digestive system and all that is. And so, yeah, that just made me think of that same thing. That's really cool, actually.
Well, apoptosis is programmed cell death,
Yep.
and if you take a human cell, any animal cell, pull it off the body, and you don't treat it well, not any animal cell, there are some cells that are resistant to apoptosis, but it will detect that something is wrong, and it will try to kill itself. That's what they do. And so you have to it's one of the reasons why a lot of our cell colonies, we take them from cancers, because one of the things that makes a cancer grow is that the genes involved in apoptosis get somehow broken or jammed or that they're not working properly.
Mm.
So a lot of the human cell cultures or animal cell culture lines that we have in laboratories, they are from tumors because that apoptosis has been disabled. We can also disable it through different chemical means, but yeah, they're if if the DNA gets severely damaged, triggers apoptosis. If a cell that's supposed to be or that's normally touching lots of other cells is suddenly all on its own, apoptosis, it'll kill itself. So it's fascinating how this evolves, and it evolves because they are reproducing through the main organism, that's how they get to the next generation, and this is inclusive fitness. It is not in their best interest to try to reproduce on their own. They can't do it. They've lost that ability over evolutionary time, and so it's the superorganism. You are a superorganism. Uh, it's the superorganism that does the reproducing, so
Yeah, I mean, in a way, we are a superorganism. We have as many bacteria in us as us, but we're obligate symbiotes. We can't live without each other. That's creepy to think about.
Well, I'm saying that superorganism just your own cells too,
Yes,
that
yes,
your trillions of
just
cells,
this.
because 'cause they're all organisms on their own, but they just have lost the ability to reproduce and survive on their own, so they're taking this cooperative strategy.
Do you know? Do you know about the weirdness of the Portuguese man of war?
I know that it's a colonial organism, but I don't know the details.
Yeah, I don't like. I haven't committed them to memory all that much, but yeah, its mantle and its stingers are genetically distinct organisms. And it's like, how do you can't classify an organism like that.
Yeah.
It's so it's so wild.
Yeah.
That's very much an aside. Another aside, this doesn't really fit terribly great, but yeah, as I was reading Levin's paper, it just kind of sparked ideas to me, and we're just bouncing ideas. That's the whole point of this. But
Yeah.
so I thought, I don't think that something needs to be alive to be intelligent. Um, as far as if there are non-living intelligent things on Earth right now, I don't know. I don't know enough, and I haven't thought about it long enough to make a diagnosis on like our large language models and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, but the so I don't think being alive is really a prerequisite, but I kind of feel like the ability to adapt to unknown problems, and that's that applying knowledge to
Yeah.
novice situations, but something that's not alive, like we wouldn't like say, do things that don't have nervous systems have memories? I guess maybe in some sort of sense. So I'm trying to be like very generic with that. So I
Well, one thing that you were saying earlier is that water doesn't change its environment, but
yeah.
tell that to the Grand Canyon, right? So
Yeah.
there are kind of ways where, uh,
Well, what I meant by that
water has
was
a memory, in
yeah.
quote, right?
What I meant by that was the idea of like if water has the goal of reaching the ocean, then it
Yep.
wouldn't go like this. But that's
Right.
what water does. That's sort of what I meant by modify the environment. Obviously,
Yeah.
it does erosion and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But So I was thinking of like smart materials, quote unquote, right?
Mhm.
But they can't do anything they're not programmed for, right? We have memory metals, for example. Uh,
Mhm.
the other kind of like some other smart materials, we've been able to combine like the way materials behave under stress in like
Yep.
really interesting ways, like Kevlar. The fact that we have bulletproof fabrics that weigh just a few grams. That's actually
Mhm.
incredibly interesting. But yeah, these smart material like they can't do anything they're not programmed for. So I can't call that I
Yeah.
don't think that's
Yeah.
even really a precursor for intelligence. And we intentionally design things to be as like smart as they can. Like if you're gonna ride a motorcycle, we you can buy like a padded leather suit or whatever that's engineered in the best way to be smart. But I was thinking I mean, the calluses on my feet, I think that that's much smarter than, you know, that biker armor or whatever we call that, because
Mhm.
that actually does protect my feet from new obstacles that they're going to encounter. And so I
Yeah.
started thinking it's almost like something that's well engineered isn't the thing doesn't possess intelligence. We use our intelligence to do it or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's almost like the key here is good programming. Which proves intelligent design is the no, just kidding. But but I started thinking like, well, how does a cell do it? Well, it's the cell's ability to divide that makes the organism capable of being able to apply that intelligence, you
Yeah.
know? And so but then I started thinking, well, I got to reduce that, and it's like it just comes from the programming. And something I read in Levin's paper that was really fascinating was uh planaria. It's been shown to be able to we can make it regrow its entire brain and it still has memories. And so
Mhm.
to me, I was like, that's, yeah, if you don't have cell division and if you don't have good, we're just going to call it programming, it would lie in the either the genetics or the cell to cell communication in this case. I don't know how the planaria are able to maintain memories after regrowing their entire brains. That's fascinating. I never heard that before, but that seems to be, a big part of it. So I rambled a bunch there, but go ahead.
Uh-huh, that's good. Um, yeah, I don't know if you had a question. I haven't looked at the planarian. I've heard him make that claim. I haven't looked at the experiments, or even if he has an explanation for it. I mean, a lot of what he's doing is, a lot of what I noticed he does a lot is he'll just report on something that he finds instead of totally trying to explain how he thinks it works because, you know, it is he a lot of what he does, he's doing this with cells, and it's very similar to older papers that you would see on, how did chimps behave in the wild and so on. You're not actually coming up with a deep explanation of how it works, you're just reporting on what you found. So, I don't know if that's what he was doing there with the planarians or if he had an actual explanation, but
Um, it was cited in reference to he's just kind of going over his tame framework in there, and I wasn't able to look into it either, but I just, um I just kinda thought that that connected really well for that with me, like, if it's really going to be intelligent, even if it's not alive, I almost feel like it has to have the ability to grow. It's such like a oddly specific thing, but, like, if it can't grow, then I don't see how it would ever, you know, build up the, like, substrate in order to be able to contain memories, and
mm,
if you're not growing and dividing, or at least like replacing things that you previously had, then how are you going to that's how you will adapt to something new. And with the whole intelligence's application of memories to new things, I just kind of thought it's got to rest somewhere in some of that maybe, but I don't know. It's very speculative thinking.
yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. I'm doing a video right now on AI and I'm looking at a philosophy paper by Johannes Jaeger, and he hates this term artificial general intelligence. He doesn't like calling anything that computers are doing as true intelligence. And I think that his, he's like on the way other side of Levin than I am even. So, like, he thinks I he's really stuck on this thing that before you could be considered intelligent, you have to be capable of autopoiesis. And what that means is that you have to be able to build yourself from the
Oh,
start.
interesting.
And he says that you have to be the originator of all of your goals, or else you're not actually intelligent. And because we tell AI what to do, it's not really intelligent. And it won't be free from us until it can build itself. And so it needs to become a von Neumann machine before it can even be considered intelligent. So he has, I'm butchering his argument, but
Right.
his it was some interesting points that he was making.
I
Uh,
I can kind of understand the sentiment because it is tempting sometimes to even look at some of the most like even mammals and be
mhm,
like, maybe it is just a biological robot. Like koalas, you can't give koalas food in a bowl because they won't eat it. They only understand I will only eat it off of a tree. And it's like,
yeah,
man, how stupid can you be? And
yeah,
I saw a video once of a wildebeest and it got attacked by a crocodile and the crocodile ripped its abdomen wide open
yeah,
and like its guts were literally touching the ground. And what it did was it reached over and started licking the area. And I was like, you that's not going to do anything. Like and so
wow.
like, like, licking a wound, your saliva has, it's got a lot of antimicrobial properties to it, you know? And so I understand, like, that's the instinct, but when an animal does that, it just seems to me like it is just instinctual, and I don't actually think that
Wow.
about animals.
My wife is a nurse, and people will do sillier stuff. So,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
the we really when we're in shock, we do not behave intelligently.
no,
We go to instincts,
yeah.
and we do weird stuff.
Yeah. We always say weird stuff too. That's like
Yeah.
a funny if you look up videos of people getting to fights online, what you find is it's the most not like the movies thing ever because like movies are scripted, you know? Whenever you see videos of fights and things, what people do is they generally shout the same word over and over and over again or like a phrase. You know, it's because we don't like it'll just literally be somebody going, hey, 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 hey.
Yeah.
And then they start screaming it. It's like, why don't you tell us what's going on instead of just screaming, hey, you know? Because we're just so that's, yeah,
Right.
an instinctual reflexive thing that we all have. Um,
Mhm.
but then there's also these studies they've done where, you know, young chimps can solve that transparent box puzzle that has several steps that are not part of the solution, but human children can't do it because, and it's like, wow, what an idiot. You know, who's the smart one here in that
Yeah,
case? But you
yeah,
can sugar pick things all you want.
well, this is actually kinda where some of the AI stuff is really interesting because we're building these pre-trained models, right?
Mhm.
And if you think of and what is the pre-trained model, they're saying that it's a certain network that's connected with different weights. And what is the brain? It's a bunch of neurons attached to each other with different weights, basically. I mean, we modeled this after the human brain. But if you think of what your genetics give you, if you're just through the process of evolution, you're getting like a pre-trained model. You got a set of instincts that are already there, and certain types of things that are going to be easier for you to learn, certain types of things that are harder for you to learn. So you're actually pre-set up in a way that really shapes the types of things you can learn, how fast you can learn.
Mm.
And we know that babies learn faces really fast. We know that small children learn language way faster than adults. Uh, all of these things, it has to do with what we've evolved to be able to do with our brains, and that makes studying intelligence way more difficult because there's a test that works good for this one species, doesn't work good for the other one, but we missed that actually that other species is also intelligent. So
Yeah.
the it's it's fun. It's a fun puzzle to try and figure this mess out.
Yeah, if only we could talk to the damn animals, that would be one thing. And, going back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier with sometimes you just look at the animals, you're like, "God, you're dumb." And that philosopher, like, he's very hardcore on this. It kinda sounds like, and this is a tempting thing to grasp to, like, if you don't have a theory of mind, for
Right.
example, then nothing, unless you have that, you're not really intelligent. Because you could always kind of make the argument that they're just biological robots, basically, unless they have that, which is not exactly fair because, like, I know that we know that we have theory of mind because we can talk
Yeah.
about it and write about it, and we have the metacognition, right? Well, we don't. I mean, it doesn't look like other animals have that, but they may have sort of a very basic form of it. But I don't think that you need that to have intelligence, though, either.
Right. Yeah, I that's theory of mind is like, it's in some list definitions and not others, and, yeah, some people are obsessed with testing for that. Some people just say, "Oh, that's a special type of intelligence, is theory of mind." I mean,
Yeah. Have you heard
and
of some of the new research that suggests we may have found grammar in some I can't remember what species of primate it is. Um, some kind of monkey. It might have been. I don't think it was geladas, but I want to say it was a type of baboon. But we think we may have found grammar in the way they do their calls, which is really, really, really fascinating
yeah.
to think about.
Yeah. Whenever you look at that, see if there was a linguist on it because, uh, there's been amazing work on what human language is, and the bits of it, the parts of it, and a lot of biologists get it wrong or they don't even reference it, but there's been really good work on that. I have a friend who's a linguist, and he gets
Yeah.
so angry when he's reading these papers. It's like a whale, has grammar, and then, there are ways in which that can be true and ways at which it can be totally false, so,
They seem to have
yeah,
dialects and,
yeah,
almost culture too, because a whale will pick up on a regional whale call that's different from the ones in its regions and then pass it along, kind of like, I grew up in the Midwest, so all the trends, they slowly trickled to us from the East Coast and the West
yeah.
Coast, is that kind of thing. I wonder what he would think about, do whales have dialects? That would be interesting.
Well, yes, dialect, I think sure, but it would be are they do they actually have language? 'Cause they can have dialects in their songs. Uh, where right now, people are trying to train AI on dolphin I think it's dolphin languages or dolphin communication and sperm whale communication, because those are actually very rich for possibly having something like language.
I heard about this. I think the Wall Street Journal had a podcast episode about it. And, like, we can't decipher it, but you feed it to the AI and it's like it's so good at, like, finding patterns and teasing them out of things that it's going, "No, no, 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 no. This is like when they do this, that is something extremely distinct and specific." I can't remember the details, but I did listen to something on that a while ago.
And one of the amazing and both of those species have radar, they see with sound.
Yeah.
So, you gotta imagine that sometimes these animals are making clicks to imitate what they saw and maybe even transmitting images to each other through
Oh,
vocalizations,
yeah.
which would be like it'd be so hard for us to catch that,
Yeah. It
or mimicking images as they're clicking to each other, but yeah, they're super, super chatty. Uh, and then there was this horrible experiment done where horrible because it was just silly, where they were playing back sounds to a humpback whale, and then the humpback whale made so they played back a sound it had made to it, and it was interested in their boat, and it came and they're like, "Oh, it has a name." And my
Yeah, that's
the
dumb.
linguists were like, "If you quack at a duck, it will" like, the hillbillies figured this out. They got a whole product line of duck whistles where they can get the duck to come to you. So, you're a little late to the show.
Yeah, with
But
that one. Yeah, that's not a very bright insight. Um
But there might be something linguistic in there, but I don't think it's been shown yet. Not in a way that satisfies linguists.
Yeah, man, I would love to talk to a linguist. I'd probably just have them tell me things for I could listen to that forever because it's such a fascinating thing. I remember, it's one of the books on human evolution I read. I don't remember which one. I think it might have been Before the Dawn. That's a really great book, but they tell the story of there's this, woman in California. I think it might have been in the 90s, and she was just kept in a basement her entire life and never spoken to. She broke free when she was 13, 14, 15, 16, right in there. I don't remember exactly, but it was in her early to mid-teens, and she never learned how to speak. She couldn't do it. She could
Yeah.
say words, but she could never, ever, ever grasp grammar. And it's crazy how there's a
Yeah.
critical period for that early on. For as intelligent, and this is one of the other weird things about humans is how intelligent are we? Like, we flew to the moon, but and like we describe all of our accomplishments and everything in,
Mhm.
in language and all that. But sometimes I just view language as this accidental hack that we came up with, and we would just clearly be living like wild animals if it weren't for that. Because I
Yeah.
think about this poor girl, and I'm like, the fact that we are this intelligent, but a 15-year-old can never learn how to make a sentence is, I mean,
Yeah,
if somebody hadn't gone through a traumatic or like hadn't been, put under crazy circumstances, we would say there's something wrong with them. But there is nothing
yeah.
wrong with her. She was just deprived of something. And then it's like, so how intelligent are we? And this is another thing that it's especially with people we're going off the rails here now, but when people make like racist and ethnocentric arguments, they say things like, "Oh, Europeans did blink blink." It's like, no, like 100 people in Europe did that and then passed it on. You didn't do anything.
Right.
You've never done any. The vast majority of us never do anything. And so then when I think about cases like that and like the language thing, how it's kind of a hack, I think to myself, maybe humans are so vastly less intelligent than we really are, or than we think we are for
Yeah.
reasons like that. And then the other thing we do, the wildest thing we do ever is just the complete and utter intentional destruction of ourselves that
Oh, yeah.
no other species would do. When people, I kind of tongue in cheek talk about this with, I debate a lot of evolution deniers, and they say, I've never seen a monkey, build a house or anything like that. And it's like they also don't like they don't invent alcohol and then
Yeah.
drink it and then invent cars and then drive them and then die by the truckloads.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we can't talk to animals, but maybe they sit around and they're like, those humans, they're
Right.
stupidest things ever. It's
Yeah. Well, yeah, so I have 2 dogs, and, I mean, it's amazing how much you can get without words, you know?
yeah,
And then it's amazing how impossible it is to communicate certain things, like, we've got, you know, "I'm gonna leave for the day, it's fine." They can't understand that, so they're
yeah,
gonna panic every time.
yeah,
Uh, like I said, my wife is a nurse. Sometimes she'll have people come in that are delirious, and it's almost impossible to work with them because they can't follow the story. They don't know what the story is. They don't know, "I'm at a hospital, this person's doing stuff that hurts, but they're caring for me." They don't know that. You are an enemy, you're a bad guy, and that's how every vet is to the dogs, right?
yeah,
The dog has it's very rare for a dog to realize I'm being helped. I mean, it happens sometimes. Sometimes an animal will be able to figure that out, but almost never. And like, with my wife, she's like, it's night and day different. It goes from, I can tell them what's going on, I can do something that's super painful, actually. They'll deal with it, they're gonna be okay, they like me afterwards, or they're delusional and they can't understand the story, and they hate me, they're terrified, I have to check on them every 5 minutes, I have to babysit them basically the whole night. They'll rip things out of their tubes, out.
Mm.
It's just it's amazing what that story does, what language does, right? And it's really it's language. I don't know. I guess you could it'd be interesting to learn more about this woman you're talking about because can she figure those things out? Can she follow these stories even though she doesn't have language, right?
Yeah.
Is she how
Yeah,
much better is she at following a story than a dog is?
her intelligence would be impossible to understand. Her IQ would be almost nothing. She can't be IQ tested because
Right.
we can't like the way we test IQ, like an IQ test pretty much tells you how good you are at taking an IQ test.
Mhm.
I mean, like we're trying, but it's all we know how to do, like our systems of standardized testing and can you mentally rotate this object, in your head and which A, B, C, or D, which if you rotated it this way, that way, what would it look
Yeah.
like, but yeah, it's a super fast, maybe when we're done, I'll grab it real quick and I'll see if the notes in there,
Oh, yeah.
say
Mhm.
what that case was. Um, Getting a little bit back on track,
Mhm.
what do you, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. So
Okay.
what do you think is the least intelligent thing with intelligence on Earth?
Oh.
And like, I wrote this question, but I'm not sure if I even really have an answer for it because it's tricky. It's
Well, yeah, it's super it's super hard to say.
I have a I have a I'll say a couple things I think might kind of inspire you to try to pick something.
Okay.
So when I thought about this, because I don't exactly know the answer, but
Yeah.
even for me, but so I don't think bacteria are intelligent. This is another Daniel Dennett quote.
Mhm.
Bacteria do things for a reason, but they don't have reasons for
Yeah.
doing things. Unless we allow ourselves to say the genome of an organism has reasons. That's a little out there for
Yeah.
me. And so bacteria can't form memories, so they can't engage in problem solving, I would say. But and actually in reading Levin's paper where he talks about that tame framework, it says that cognition isn't binary, but it's gradualistic. And I agree with that. And
Mhm.
I think things even, or he says that even things without brains could possibly have, minds, intelligence, they can learn, etc. So if I adopt that and I try to like think of what's the dumbest thing with intelligence, like
Yeah.
organism on Earth. So I would say a zygote can't do any of those things like that the tame framework lays out. The having a mind, intelligence, learning, problem solving, things like that. So I think it's almost just like the bacteria.
Oh,
But
yeah.
so I don't think a zygote has any of those things. So whatever the most like undeveloped or simplest or stupidest organism or whatever that has intelligence, it would basically have to be akin to whatever developmental stage we think that starts in us, you know?
Oh, yeah. And
That's how and then but it's hard to figure out when that is, like when the neural
oh, yeah, for
hold
sure.
first forms or whatever, and then what kind of organism is closest to. So maybe it'd be easier to just do this. Just like yes or no.
Okay.
Tardigrade, yes or no.
Oof. I don't even know if I can do these quick yes or no thing. You'd have to do experiments. But, uh,
That's a good scientific answer.
yeah. Um, I would imagine it would not pass any of those experiments that we're used to doing in intelligence, but you'd have to actually do the experiment.
Interesting. Um, what about an ant?
I think it's very likely that some ants are displaying in they are displaying signs of actual intelligence. I think that probably is happening, but very limited.
What about jellyfish?
Jellyfish, probably not. It's probably if it's learning, it's probably just kinda Pavlovian learning.
Yeah. Yeah, no ability to apply what they've experienced to like a
Yeah.
new thing. Okay. Man, how much more like a flatworm? What do you think about them?
Uh, well, again, I don't know.
Sure,
I
you have to
haven't seen
say.
studies on those, but the animal that I was gonna say is, like, The one that's just funny to me is the goldfish because it looks so dumb. They
Yeah.
just look like idiots, right?
Yeah.
But that's a trick because they don't really have good facial expressions. But they're and that's what we kinda use as cues. We're dumb, everything has to look like us or else we can't, tell it that it's intelligent. But they've shown that you can actually yeah, you can train them all sorts of tricks. They'll try and solve problems. They're actually pretty clever.
Yeah, I
So,
saw a group of pretty sure it was a goldfish. Some scientists in Israel, they trained it to drive a car,
nice.
which is
Nice.
which is pretty
Right.
awesome, yeah.
Some of those are tricks where it's like, you know, 'cause yeah, there are people that have, fungus play music, right? Have you seen that?
I haven't seen that, no.
They're just measuring the electric fields inside the plant and they're or sorry, inside the fungus, and then they're connecting that to a keyboard, and when there's a certain threshold, it makes a noise. It's not actually playing music, right? So I've seen a lot of things like that where they're little gimmicky little, publicity stunts. I don't know why people do those, but
Yeah. Yeah, that trying to think of the dumbest intelligent thing, it's I would strongly suspect that, ants, termites, or bees, one of those eusocial insects is gonna have I could see a spider, potentially being, intelligent, but I hardly think all arthropods are
yeah,
intelligent. There would be some examples where I wouldn't agree with it. And then you think of mollusks, like very obviously octopuses and squid and cuttlefish are very intelligent. A clam, well, I don't know, maybe. um, and then yeah, as far as like jellyfish, what you said makes sense. I don't think even the really sophisticated, like the box jellyfish, I don't think there's probably any kind of real intelligence necessarily going on there.
yeah,
Um, all right. So now we get into now we're gonna these are like some kind of wild things, just a few of them.
okay,
So
okay,
I think that um if there is like intelligent life somewhere else in the universe, it probably won't have a lot of it won't have neurons. And I
yeah,
I don't mean like nervous tissue like animals have, but like I can believe that the idea of like electrically conductive tissue is the best tissue to create like what our nervous system like generically what our nervous system is made of. We'll find some of that. And so like we could call it a nervous system, I guess,
okay,
in a way. But I can sort of imagine, our bodies, they have another signaling system in them, and it's the endocrine system. It just works in slow motion, you know?
yeah,
So I can imagine that some sort of alien life that is intelligent doesn't have neurons or something that doesn't really behave like neurons. I can imagine that, I
yeah.
guess. Like it makes logical sense to me, kind of, sort of. So do you think, do you think that there's anything on Earth that doesn't have neurons that is intelligent?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because you could have really slow minds, right?
Mhm.
Or really, really fast minds that work totally different than ours, and both of them would be it'd be hard for us to tell. So, yeah, maybe plants are doing things that we should call intelligence, even if we're using the strict definitions that are in the field of animal intelligence. Maybe there are things that plants are doing that qualify for that, and it's hard to tell because 'cause they're going in such slow motion. Yeah, you're right. If you're doing just chemical signaling or, other any other type of signaling, it it's gonna be a lot slower than electric signaling. So,
Mhm.
you you could miss intelligence elsewhere.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to it's really hard for me to imagine that an organism that doesn't have some sort of sensory system, would be intelligent because I
Mhm.
I think you have to create a model of your surroundings to be intelligent. I think you have to be able to do that somehow. And how you could do that intelligence researchers might actually know of purely cellular systems that are not neuronal that do that here on Earth. They might know examples. I
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, pretty much every cell has sensors on it, on the outside of the cell. So they can tell a lot of cells can detect pressure,
yeah, pH and stuff like
they can detect all sorts of chemicals that might be in the solution around them. So, yeah, we've got tons of sensors, I mean, that's how all of our sense organs work is there.
yeah, yeah. That makes perfect sense. I actually feel kind of dumb for saying that now, but it's just I'm just so biased toward my senses, and they're all
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they're all neuronal, you know. So yeah, it's hard, but to somehow now we have detectors, but how do you store and integrate that information to create something like memories or to create a mind basically out of those? That's where um that's where I don't feel too stupid in imagining, well, how could that happen?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, how many weird ways can we build a mind?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the engineering question right now. That's what people are trying to do. They're trying to build robotic minds and, yeah, studying different systems that evolve that are able to do the same thing. We have no problem saying that a bird has wings and a bug has wings because the end result is the same.
Yeah.
And so this is, again, a nod to Michael Levin. It doesn't matter if it's neurons, if it's doing the same thing. Shouldn't we, call it a mind? Shouldn't we say that it's intelligence? That's a good argument, I think. So we some of the things that we do consider minds, like, we consider crows to be intelligent, we consider apes to be intelligent. The organisms that, if you go back in the evolutionary tree that connect those 2, probably weren't very intelligent, but this evolved independently in both lineages, and it functions the same. It functions the same enough. If you look at their brains, set up totally differently. Birds have these, like, little sphere things inside their brain. We have these layers instead. It looks very different. It's set up very different, but it still works, and the end result is very, very similar. It's kind of like, uh, oh, let's see. I'm trying to think of a trait that's like that. Well, I think the wings and the bug wing and the bird wing
Yeah.
is a good example. It's doing the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a shame that life didn't evolve two different kinds of nervous systems completely independently.
Yeah.
That could help us a lot with this whole intelligence research and what a different kind of mind or brain or intelligence could
Yeah.
look like. But unfortunately, it didn't do it that way. The
Right.
first one really caught on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what Michael Levin's trying to do, right? With his broader scope of things. Try to find an alternative mind that already exists. But yeah, it doesn't seem like many exist. And if they are, they're not doing things that are super interesting. But we are building them now in computers. So it's super interesting. I really like this. Well, it's scary in many ways, but I it's it's a weird, wild time to be alive where
Yeah.
people are trying to build machines that can do all these things.
I wonder if maybe you take so going to this like examples of things that are intelligent that don't have a brain.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a couple different ways to think about this. Like I think that a termite is intelligent,
Mhm.
and it has a brain. But let's say I was convinced that it doesn't, or a bee has a brain but isn't intelligent. Well, I I could see myself being convinced that those insects don't have real intelligence. I could see myself believing that, but believing that the colony does kind of have some
Yeah.
sort of intelligence, because the
Mhm.
colony will solve problems for itself and it will adapt in new situations
Mhm.
and things like that. Um, and so then the colony doesn't have a brain. It's made of
Right.
organisms that have brains, but it actually isn't a brain, but it is something that's intelligent. That's actually
Mhm.
that's actually kind of cool to to think about. And maybe
Well, yeah, but well, here's a question. What about the corporation known as McDonald's? Because it's making decisions no individual would make, right?
yeah,
Like, I mean, some of them are horrible. It's like it's making people unhealthy. Like, I used to live in Brazil, and if you just, uh, people always wanna feed you, and they wanna feed you good food that's healthy, and it's gonna make you strong, like the women in the neighborhood that wanna just feed all the kids that are around.
yeah.
They care deeply about that being healthy, nutritious, good food. McDonald's is not doing that at all. They just wanna make something that's gonna sell really, really well and be really convenient for them to make and convenient for you to eat because that's what the customer seems to want. So you get this kinda weird, gross thing where decisions are being made that no ethical human would make, even the way they treat their animals and so on. But the corporation makes those decisions because everyone's like, "Oh, well, I have to treat the cow like this because it's cheaper. So I'm just gonna do this. And it's not my fault, it's the corporation's fault." And the corporation's like, "Oh, it's not my fault, it's the farmer's fault."
Moving
Everyone's
to, yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's passing the buck. Everyone's making these weird decisions, and just the type of thing that comes out of that, the collective intelligence that comes out of that ends up making decisions that no individual person would make. And I
Hmm.
find that really interesting. There's
That is interesting. Hmm. Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's like going to war. I always, when I think of, well, it's true even today, but it was so much more true in the past when you just had to take your 5,000 people and run head on into the net. It's like, how did that ever work? Because I would never be the guy in the front. And I
yeah,
can't imagine any rational actor desiring to be the person in the front with the
yep,
100% mortality rate effectively. But yeah, but it's in the interest of something else, which
yeah.
is, the nation, the king, the whatever, the thought that maybe you'll get lucky and survive and have stories to tell or whatever. That is
We're
interesting.
also watching movies of it. I'm sure I'm sure it looked different,
Yeah.
and there's a lot more coercion, like, maybe the people behind you were poking you. Uh,
That
so
could be. Yeah. Yeah.
But
There's a lot of
but you can also have
conscription over here.
a culture of extreme warriors where it's like, "Yeah, this we're obsessed with this." So, yeah, there's lots of interesting tricks that happen, but the way that minds work and the way that culture works, I mean, so you're talking about the bees as a collective brain, right?
Yeah, like the colony doesn't have a brain
Yeah,
technically, but it is intelligent. And then I was thinking like, well, maybe a forest is like that, you know?
right.
Maybe a tree isn't intelligent. They do cool things like they can chemically signal through the mycelium network to a neighboring tree. I'm getting attacked by bark beetles, hypersecrete sap,
Mhm.
as a preemptive protection. And is that intelligence? Well, uh,
Yeah. So there's a whole field of signaling theory where they would consider that not to be true signals. They would consider a lot of that. Some of it might be true signals, but a lot of it is cue detection. So the difference between a signal and a cue. When I'm walking through the woods, I'm stepping on sticks and stuff. A bear might hear that and then know it doesn't want to mess with me and it'll run away. Or it knows it's hungry, it'll run towards me. Right. Right. So that's a cue. I'm not trying to send that out. It's detecting it and it's changing its behavior. A signal would be like when I was a kid in Boy Scouts, we were told that you should sing when you're in the forest because this forest has black bears and black bears are scared of humans, but they will kill you if you surprise them. So you should sing to not surprise them. And now I'm actually announcing my presence. It's active on my part. And in evolutionary biology, they talk about signaling systems where you can evolve the the active transmission of a signal of some kind, and then the receiver will behave in a specific way that both benefit. We call that a signal. If one individual is benefiting and the other one's being exploited, we call that just cue detection. And a lot of times, what's happening in the forest, for example, a lot of that is cue detection. It's just, I know that this molecule comes out of the body of this organism when it's being attacked, and I know that I should prepare because I've received that information now. Know is the wrong word, but these are plants, but
Right.
their 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 systems start to charge up to get ready for that attack. With bees, it's very different. Almost everything that they're doing with each other is actual signaling. You have receptors on one organism that are that are detecting signals from another. You really do have an interconnection of the brains. You got a bunch of little brains connected through these signaling systems. Humans have a bunch of brains connected through communication systems, language in our case. So we do have ways to tether our brains to each other and to actually produce a larger brain that way, which is really interesting.
Mm. Yeah, that is really fascinating. But then, yeah, when I think of the tree, and even if it's just doing the
Cue detect.
cue
Yeah.
detection,
Mm.
I can agree with that. But a neuron isn't doing anything more special than that. But when you get enough of them, it creates, a brain which is capable of
Yeah.
producing intelligence. So maybe a fourth. I don't know. That's just what on is there anything actually on Earth that doesn't have neurons that is intelligent? I don't know. I think the superorganism might be the the
Yeah.
if I was gonna pick anything or like a candidate, I don't know. I guess that's what I would
Yeah.
nominate. Um, so now this is where maybe every single thing we have talked about and all the research Michael Levin does now just has to get thrown out the window because, well, if I and I don't, if I don't believe in free will, then how can I say that I have intelligence and bacteria don't? Because intelligence seems to describe the desire and the capacity to do things, but without free will, I am just a biological robot.
Yeah, I mean, these questions are, these questions of whether or not we have agency. It's like it it's kind of like asking whether or not a table is real because it's made of atoms. I would say that we are decision-making evolved machines, right?
Sure.
But our ability is to what we do is we take in information, and then we try to figure out what the best response would be, and then we execute that response the best way we can. Is that free will or not? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly not. I don't believe in the type of free will that you would find in like the magical free will where I literally determine everything.
Yeah.
I'm my self-made man, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, we are extremely limited, but we do have degrees of freedom, and those are degrees of freedom that evolved. Uh, we have these traits that allow us to do some really clever stuff and solve problems that you could not do without that ability. And part of that is taking in information and ruminating on it a lot for a long time and then making a decision. Like I I decided I was going to get married after thinking about it for a long time, or I decided I was going to go to this school versus that school. That's certainly intelligent. Uh, you are making a choice. Whether or not you want to call that free will, I don't know. It depends on it depends on a matter of preference, I think.
Yeah, it's just it's so funny to imagine like how that could just kind of blow things up. Because I was thinking like a human will do something that just seems incredibly intelligent. Like maybe you're feeling really lethargic and you can't figure out why. So you go to a clinic to get blood testing done and they find out that you're like really low in electrolytes, right?
Yeah.
And so that's it. And all that seems very deliberate and metacognitive and all this other stuff.
Mhm.
Whereas, what does a cow do? A cow just licks salt, and a cow has no idea why it licks salt. It just
Yeah.
knows when I feel this way, I lick salt. Now I have electrolytes. But if I don't have free will, and all that stuff about going to the clinic and all that was basically like if I knew all the conditions in the universe 10 years
Mhm.
ago, I would have known I was going to do all of those things. And it's like, how can something that is determined be intelligent? And it's very, it gets to the point where you're just saying like, well, I'm just describing what human behavior is. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
whether or not you have free will, because otherwise you have to concede, okay, well, I have as many degrees of freedom. Like there's this, I don't know what you want to call it, potential space that we operate in. I could do this, I could do that, but it was always known that I was going to do these things. And it's like water flowing down a hill has no free will either. It's physical and subject to the laws of physics. This is just me personally. I think that even we are just physical things at the mercy of the laws of physics, and so we don't have free will. We don't decide to do things. And so then it's like, then now what? It's very
Yeah. Uh,
weird.
yeah, I'm trying to think like, yeah, how to talk through the even do I even have anything interesting to say here? Because you're right, it gets really complicated when you think of. I'm quite certain that for every decision that I've made, I could not have made otherwise, right? However, I do have this interesting ability to like, "Ooh, that was a bad choice that I
Yeah.
just made,
Yeah.
even though I couldn't have made otherwise at the time. That was a bad choice. Let me feel a bunch of anxiety and regret and whatever, and that's going to set me internally to not do that again."
Mhm.
Right? Like I've heard, I think it was there's some woman, some philosopher who was talking about this with, she believes that shame is just an error emotion. Basically, it's not good for anything. She was a philosopher of free will and of mind. It's Sam Harris's wife. What's her name?
Oh, really? Hmm.
Uh,
I don't agree with that at all. I think shame's a very important, powerful
yeah,
tool, actually.
I think she no longer believes that, but for a while she was making this argument. But she suffered like crippling shame as a child, and to me, I would say that like shame is a type of pain just like any other type of pain, and the point is that it's to get you to change your behavior. It evolved in a certain way. But just like any type of pain, you can have chronic pain that's just destructive because there's an error. And that's probably what she was experiencing because my experience with shame is, it's I do something that's socially wrong in my group, my social group, and then I feel shame, and then I learn not to do that again. And it's like, it makes you hyper aware when you're about to do something like that again, and we've been experiencing this since we were children, and so now we know how to behave in social groups. I see that as extremely important. I don't know that I'm defining shame the way that she is, but the I would say that the special thing about us is that we can adjust to past experiences. So we experience these things, we have these emotions, we think about them, we process them, and then that resets us to make a decision again in the future. When we make that decision, of course, we couldn't have made otherwise,
Mm.
but we will have made a different decision than before because we've done all that work between now and then.
Yeah.
And it, there's a way though where when you zoom all the way in, where it's really just ping pong balls bouncing off each other, right?
Yeah, and I mean, even if the fact that, uh, we will be, um, introspective on something and that modifies our behavior, but you could argue, well, even that's predetermined, but I find comfort in this really there are these hilarious studies apparently that have been done where you can teach chimps, uh, the value of numbers, like 1 through 10. Like, you can get them to understand that 8 represents a greater quantity than 5, you know?
Yeah.
But they've done this hilarious experiment on them. It's so mean, but it's so funny. What they do is they tie a food reward to the numbers, so the chimp, they put 2 numbers in front of them
Mhm.
and a bigger number or a smaller number, and then that's tied to their food reward. except the chimps seem to be what the experimenters do is they flip the food value and the number value. So you have to pick the smaller number to get the bigger reward. The chimps can't do it. They simply cannot do it. And they know that they fail and it drives them crazy. Like
Really?
they pick the smaller number and then they get the smaller food reward, and the chimps, like, you can see it on their face. They literally, like, it's agonizing for them. It's kind of like the grape versus with the capuchin monkeys. What is it?
After the grape versus the cucumber.
Yeah, the cucumber. Yeah, the grape. It's
It's
they
so angry.
they go ape shit over this, and like the fact that they are self-aware enough to understand that they made a mistake, basically, but it doesn't modify their future behavior. We definitely have that, but not everybody all the time. Maybe not even everybody most of the time, but it does at least exist. So that's good.
Yeah, that's another thing to point out when we're talking about are humans intelligent? We don't mean all the time. We have instincts. We make all sorts of decisions through trial and error. But we do everything. But sometimes we do stuff intelligently. So that's what these researchers are trying to tease out. Yeah, it's good. It's a fun conversation. The free will stuff, that stuff, man, it breaks your brain to think about it too much. And then you have determinism versus real randomness. Does that even change anything? I don't think so. I mean, still it's I'm not the one really being the free agent then. I'm rolling a dice instead.
Yeah.
That doesn't really change it that much. So like, I feel like no matter how you look at it, it's the magical version of free will that a lot of people think of when they talk about free will just can't be real.
Yeah. Yeah, the magical kind or whatever, which people never even, like, describe what it's supposed to be. They just basically explain. It's just an explanation of what you could potentially do.
Right.
But we talk about it as if it's something we possess, when really it's just a description of, like, what happens. I just today finished a book called An Anatomy of Violence: The Biological Roots of Crime.
Yeah.
And it's not about free will, really. If you read Sapolsky's books, he really rails against free will, and his books are so
Oh
good.
yeah.
And this book was really good too, because it confronts you with case scenarios that just make you go, "What? This isn't fair. I don't know what I now have sympathy for." Like, they'll do an example where and these are real cases, like a guy who was just engaging in the most horrendous, immoral, unethical behavior, like the kind of thing where if he did this to somebody you'd go and kill him personally, and you didn't care if he got life in prison for it. And what they found out was he had a tumor in his frontal lobe. They
Yeah.
removed the tumor, and he completely went back to just being a normal person.
Yeah.
And then he relapsed, and they thought, "Oh, it wasn't the tumor. He just actually is." But no, the tumor grew back, and then they took it out again, and he's had not a single recidivist event or whatever. And it's like,
That's crazy.
how I don't think you can even punish somebody like that. Like, you shouldn't. Maybe, like, monetarily to compensate for people that have been harmed, but I actually would think that would be more of a responsibility of the state in that case. And so it's like, I just and there's some stuff about intelligence in there, and how, like, the environment and stuff really can drag down intelligence, unfortunately, and then make you more susceptible to crime.
Well, yeah, we build reputations. We care about our reputations. We care about maintaining them. We care about judging other people's. All this is so we can know how much we can trust a person. In that case, you've got a tumor that makes them totally change. I knew a lady who her husband was hit in the head with a shovel, and she'd been taking care of him for like 20 years afterwards. And he was just mean all the time, super mean to her, super mean to everybody. And she's like, he was an amazing guy before this happened. And it's so weird. I mean, I was amazed that she stuck with him, and she's just taking care of him. He's now paralyzed, and he's super aggressive verbally. He can't be physically aggressive, but it's amazing that your personality can change like that. And my wife when she was studying, she was working in nursing homes, and she said, when you get old, your brain starts to go, you can break in a happy way or a sad, horrible way. She's like,
Mm.
some of these people are just like happy children until they die, and some of them are just paranoid and they think that someone's out to get them, and it just depends on how your brain breaks as it's breaking. It's just this cruel experiment that gets played on us. If you roll the wrong pair, you get the wrong cards, you're just in misery.
Yeah, the author tells a few stories. He talks about the Phineas Gage story, which kind of everybody knows that. He became sort of more basal and animalistic after the accident. But,
Mm,
actually, most of the indications are that actually didn't last all that long for Gage. He actually kinda went back to being pretty normal afterwards, but there's this other story, I don't remember the person's name, but they lived in London, I believe, and I don't remember what happened, but they fell off a building and landed on a wrought iron fence, and it went through his brain in pretty much the exact same location as Phineas Gage, survived it, and no changes to this person at all. It didn't change their behavior whatsoever. And then there was a third case of somebody who was um pretty deviant, that like what you would think frontal lobe damage would cause to somebody. This guy just was like that. And then I don't remember how, but he got frontal lobe damage and then he became nicer. So like
mm. Yeah,
we have both extremes and then no change. And yes, it's like nothing is fair.
yeah, it's
It's
crazy.
crazy to think
It
about
really
it.
is.
All the
And then, of course, you don't choose your environment and your upbringing and your nutrition as a child and your education. I mean, like, all your opportunities. It's just yeah, that's like was it Sapolsky, right? He's the
Yeah.
one who's just like, "Yeah, we shouldn't hold anyone responsible for this." But then holding people responsible actually changes people's behavior. So it's a weird, people do respond to rules, they do respond to norms. So if you don't hold anyone responsible, I mean, at the very least, you have to get dangerous people off the street, right? So
Yeah,
they're not
you can sort of hold the opinion that it's not their fault, but they are responsible. Like
yeah,
that's how we think about animals. Like we think it's kind of tragic when, a dog or a bear or the gorilla at the zoo has to
yeah,
be like shot because of what it did. But we understand that it's responsible for it, even if it didn't really choose to be. Y
or maybe it's not responsible for it, but we can't have that in our community or
Yeah.
in our
Yeah, you have the obligation to mitigate what's happening.
yeah, if you have a bear that's constantly threatening people that and you can't get it to leave, then you might decide it's best to shoot it, right?
Yeah.
For the peace of the community. I mean, you're doing it so it's easier on your tribe, but but yeah. I think a lot of what we do with prison is, yeah, we put people in prison and we get some sort of revenge by doing this, but really sometimes people just need a timeout so they can, mature a little bit, or sometimes they just need, uh they're so dangerous, they just need to be not free for a while
Yeah.
so they can't do those things to other people they were doing before. But that doesn't have to be, like, revenge against them or a punishment. You could have a rehabilitative prison system or a holding tank prison system. There's other ways to think about it, right?
Yeah, the American justice system is very, very much it is not proactive. It's very much reactive and yeah, built on revenge.
Yeah.
And there are I don't know. I think we're learning our lessons with some of that stuff. Jared Diamond has kind of a cool book called The World Before Yesterday, and it talks about how in societies that are not complex at all. They mediate wrongdoings, even as extreme as, murder by, the chief or the community, however they decide to do it. They literally just get people together and they just talk about it. And
Yeah.
uh, that's kind of how they deal with it. And they've shown how, in the courtroom, some really heinous cases happen, like murders or whatever happen. And they've adopted a framework like this. Now, the person doesn't like get away with anything,
Right.
but they bring in the families of the victims and they talk to the person. The person tells them, well, I was a foster child. I was beat up every single day. I was, sexually blah, 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 blah. They tell them, and uh, not every case is like this, but a lot of cases are like this. And the families genuinely think to themselves, I don't at all want this person to get the death penalty. I the I find this person morally responsible, but I have sympathy for them. And probably the most important thing is the families of victims get huge amounts of closure from
Yeah.
that as well. And so that's I think we could learn to, adopt that as part of the model for how we go about doing justice.
Yeah.
But doesn't really have to do anything with intelligence stuff, but
No.
I'm
Well,
happy
it's
to
social
talk about it.
intelligence, right? I mean, it actually kind of does because so we've gone from the system we evolved in is tribal, right? Small bands of people, most likely. That's what most people assume. If you ever get a really large group, you're holding them together with in a tribe, it's all reputational. Everyone knows everybody. It's tit for tat. Like, oh, so and so is injured. We're going to take care of them because we know that they're a good person because they have a reputation they've been keeping with us. Sometimes you can get away with larger societies if you use something like religion that's a really strict, and so you really know kind of the way that these different people are living and how they're going to respond. And then you get really big and you need things like money. Our money is how we keep reputation now. We have a symbol. I contributed to this economy, so I'm allowed to take this orange now from the grocery store. And I proving it by giving you money. So I contributed to the pot. I'm taking from the pot now. And then you have our legal system. Like all of these things that used to be tribal, we now have systems for them,
Mhm.
and the results can be horrible in certain cases. Systems can be exploited. You can get rich by not actually contributing. You can you can be contributing a lot and not have money. So all of these things have huge, trade-offs. But here we are. It's a it's it's a weird form of collective intelligence, and as we are shifting from one way of doing things to another, there's all sorts of problems and all sorts of new opportunities. Very strange.
Yeah, it's really interesting. From what I've read, 150 is about the biggest a group of people can get where everybody can know everybody.
Yeah.
And so that seemed to in the past be our upper limit. Now, obviously, we've gone way past that. And how did we do that? Well, yeah, we had to invent systems or concepts that unite everybody because in the tribe, it's kind of like for the greater good,
Yeah.
or for the collective good. I should not the greater good, but the collective good. But yeah, like you invent a religion and you can get a huge community together because humans, because of our theory of mind and our metacognition, we kind of understand that we're all united in this
Mhm.
one thing, and it's maybe the biggest influence behind how outside of like technology and language, how we got here. Have you ever read Yuval Noah Harari's books?
I started listening to one on a road trip last summer, but I only got through, like, I think probably 20 minutes or so.
Sapiens is really good.
That's what I was reading.
I haven't read it in probably 8 years or so, but
Mhm.
he has this idea that actually it just makes perfect sense. One
Mhm.
of the and he talks about it in almost all of his books. What makes humans so incredible is ability to invent fictions and then coalesce around them. Because, you know, what do you think would happen if you put 1,000 chimpanzees in the same room?
Yeah,
It'd just
would
it'd be
it'd be chaos.
horrendous, right? Now, what's actually really funny is, what do you think would happen if we took 100,000 humans and put them all in the same place? Just off the top of your head, how do you think that would go?
Yeah. How same of a place? Like,
Just kind of
we
like it could
get
just be
together
like a big,
shopping mall.
big, a big open area. Like
Yeah.
it's not the Hunger Games. Like there's bathrooms and stuff like that, but just 100,000 people all in one kind of general area.
How long they gotta stay there?
Hours.
Yeah, because I mean, that's the airport, right? Maybe not
Yeah,
hundreds of thousands, but
I was thinking like an NFL game. You know,
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
um, like when you just think about that, like in general, if I just took 100,000 and nobody knows anybody else,
Right.
and you just put them in this place, it just sounds like the kind of thing that would devolve into chaos, but we actually do that all the time. I actually think grocery stores aren't even very good examples because everybody's kind of there for themselves. It's very
Right.
selfish, and people actually act horribly sometimes in those places.
Yeah.
Now that does happen in sporting arenas too, but
Or like
they're
concerts.
there
Yeah.
united around a common idea, which is
Mhm.
we're here
Yeah.
to watch a football game, you know? Um, and like I said, because of alcohol and because it's a competition, it can but it's actually so much more sane and rational and controlled than even makes sense in a
Yeah.
way. If you really start to think about it, like, what do you mean 9 people weren't murdered? Like, they were there for we trapped them in there for hours,
Right.
you know? It's and it's I think his idea about that is right, and that's I think that's why there's all this talk about, like, is religion, like, evolutionarily selective or advantageous or whatever? Um, I think it is
Yeah, yeah.
because what it does is it unites people, around a common idea, and Um, I used to have a lot to say about that, but I'd have to sit down and kind of mull over the
Yeah.
ideas.
Well, I was raised Mormon. It did not stick with me, but I have an identical twin brother. He stayed in it a lot longer than I did. He's no longer a Mormon either, but the he stuck with it through getting married, and then so he had a bunch of kids, and I don't have any kids, yeah, but, I have an identical twin brother, and he had 6 kids, so my genes have been spread, but, you know, I'm married, my wife and I, we have dogs, where that's fine for us, but the religion was a big impact on him having kids because they push having kids, it's a big part of it, it's like
Yeah.
the point of this is to have kids, and we're gonna have lots of kids, and so he had 6. So, yeah, just from a pure evolutionary perspective, well, he's way more evolutionarily fit than I am, and it's because he was Mormon longer than I was, but
That's really interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, but
But,
he's
I
got
mean, that's
nothing
my
on Genghis
little
Khan,
story.
so
Yeah, yeah. And I just went to a family reunion, and it was crazy because it's just my grandma and my grandpa, they had 5 kids, one of their sons had 10 kids, and just there's over 100 of us now
wow.
already,
Yeah.
and it's just it adds up fast, it's crazy, exponential growth,
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, it really does. Well, I am out of ideas at this point, but it was a really fun chat. It was about a 2-hour conversation,
Mhm.
so that was awesome.
Yeah.
Anything just kind of in closing, anything you thought of that you didn't get out or anything like that?
No, well, I'm curious to see what people think of that experiment, uh, it's just really, it's just something that's been bothering me since forever, like, they didn't do controls, they need to do controls, uh there's actually we talk about these crisis there's a crisis in science where there's a replication crisis and so on, you hear these things.
Yeah, it's
I
psychology, it's really big too, yeah.
Yeah, I would say we actually do have a problem where we're not doing good controls. Lots of experiments are lacking the controls. The conclusion that they have does not really match. They weren't thorough enough. I feel like we used to be better at this. You read older papers and they're trying to be as thorough as possible and test every different idea or think of every different idea. And I think that maybe what's been going on is that we've been publishing so much so fast that we're not the communities aren't really debating with as much as they used to about things. Maybe just because science got so big, and it's similar to this tribal stuff that we're talking about. Once a group gets too big, you have to go to a different method of, keeping everybody in check. You go from reputation to religion to money to, I think science is kinda going through a transition like that where it got really big. We got a lot of researchers, a lot of people involved in this, and they're not doing what they used to do in these tighter groups. So, that's something that I've noticed, and it's been frustrating me when I'm reading papers is like, "Oh, come on, guys." So, I made it my little side project, I guess, to go ahead and do one for them. I don't know how appreciative they were of that, but
Yeah, I've heard the total amount of published scientific information doubles every 2 years,
yeah.
which is or no,
So
it's actually information in general.
okay.
Veritasium, I believe, did a video on this really recently. The total amount of just general information. So I would assume by extension for science it's about like that too. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
doubles every
it's
2 years.
something that we know too is that garbage science is growing faster. It's growing at a faster rate. So it's not that there's more garbage science than there is good science. It's at the rate of growth of garbage science, stuff manipulated by industry and so on, where it's actually bad actors really manipulating data. That is increasing at a faster rate than scientific knowledge in general is. So, the ratio is. So if it continues, it'll eventually catch up and there'll be nothing but junk science. But this is a problem, and it's not really clear why that's happening, what's going on. There's some papers coming out on that right now. There's quite a few. And actually, there's one coming out on controls that I got to read early, the lack of controls in modern studies. And it's, yeah, people are trying to fight this, but it's an interesting problem. So,
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think we'll leave on that note, I guess.
yeah, cool. All right. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thanks everybody for watching.